This is Brian with ScreenFiles.com and Review. And what I'm looking at today is 2024's Graveyard Shark, directed by Matthew Peters. Sometimes when I watch movies, I get into the mindset of thinking of them how I wish they were, as opposed to what they actually are. Though that is something I try to avoid when I do a review. I mention that because Graveyard Shark is probably not the type of movie I would make, if only because it takes nothing seriously. And whatever happens to people, it's kind of geared to be funny. Though speaking of that, what's kind of odd is that when a character named Dr. Jan Lovnik is dying and Abby holds her, it's a genuinely touching moment. And it is probably the only time in Graveyard Shark that is not geared to getting a laugh. And it's an affecting part of the movie. And I'm not saying don't make a comedy, though what I'm saying is the best comedies also have elements of seriousness to them. Everything and everyone in the comedy doesn't have to be in on the joke. And in fact, I would argue that the best comedies, characters aren't in on the joke. Making comedy is not an easy thing, and it's particularly hard, I would argue, when everyone tries to be funny. If you've seen any of Mel Brooks' movies, well, most of them anyway, he does that quite often, and it tends to work. But then again, that's Mel Brooks. Not too many other directors really do that. So in the case of Graveyard Shark, there's none of that tension, which a straight person combined with a funny person could potentially bring. It's just people saying and acting weird. Virtually every person in the movie does it. And as a result, it doesn't really come off as funny. It has funny moments, though. I'm not saying it's not, at points, an enjoyable watch. Though I am saying is that it's not really funny because it comes off too self-aware that it's trying to be funny. If it would just relax and breathe and have more varied types of scene, I think it would actually work better as a comedy. It's worth mentioning that Bindele March, who plays Captain Isaac Seaburn, and Stephanie Ward, who plays Abby, are really strong in their role. Conversely, everyone else is game. Their abilities vary, but they're trying. Though Captain Seaburn and Abby are really good. And that's part of the reason why, as well as the scene I mentioned already, that I wish the movie gave them space to be a little dramatic. Because everything in Graveyard Shark is a joke.
When I'm old and I've had my fun, I'll sell my inventions so that everyone can be superheroes. Everyone can be super. And when everyone's super, no one will be.
The practical shark suit is a really good touch, and I applaud Matthew Peters and the people who worked on it. It looks pretty good, though the problem is that it's dressed like something from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or Street Shark, and the narrative doesn't explain why it looks the way it looks. The thing is, as I said, it doesn't look bad, and for some reason I kept getting a vibe of Arnold Schwarzenegger from the first Terminator.
Nice night for a walk, eh?
Nice night for a walk.
Wash day tomorrow. Nothing clean, right?
Nothing clean, right?
Hey, I think this guy's a couple cans short of a six-pack.
Your clothes. Give them to me, now.
But, other than the way the shark was dressed, there's nothing really that warranted such a thought. Because, as I said, it just kind of is. And that's, for me, a little frustrating, because nothing is really explained, and things just are. And with movies, that doesn't really work for me. I need to have some understanding of why things are happening and why characters look the way they look, particularly in this instance. Oh yes, I should mention also that another reason Arnold Schwarzenegger from the Terminator came to mind is that This shark creature is built. I mean, it's really muscular. Why is it muscular? Who knows? It's these things that distract from the narrative that also is not great. I wanted to just watch the movie, but I kept wondering why things work, and that gets a little frustrating. I was able to sit back and let it wash over me, pardon the pun, but it took a while. A fun little aspect of the movie was that there was a survivors group for graveyard shark victims, and they had cute little leaflets and everything. I really enjoyed that. That's kind of funny. Though no one seemed to note that the graveyard shark has the head of a hammerhead shark. It sounds like a relatively minor detail, but their hammerhead shark is probably one of the most distinctive sharks on the planet. That this survivors group never mentions once that this thing looks like a hammerhead shark is odd. Once again, it's a little thing, but it's a little thing that should have been paid attention to. And it's worth mentioning that Matthew Peters could have taken the asylum out, which is to say, like in their movie Shark Side of the Moon.
Henry! We are going home.
Use CGI to create their monsters, which would have been terrible for a graveyard shark, because at least it was there. The costume was pretty good, and it added so much production value, and you can't overestimate how important that is, especially for a movie with I assume, a relatively small production cost. Another thing that I enjoyed is that Matthew Peters resisted the urge to use drone footage. And in fact, there are just 2 scenes I recall with drones. My issue with drones is that in most movies, particularly lower budget movies, they don't add value to the production. And it's just B-roll. And I wish they would stop using it. Honestly, I've seen very few lower budget movies that benefited for having a drone. That's not to say that you can't use a drone, as in it has no importance to a production. That's not what I said. What I said is the way many lower production movies tend to use drones, it is a waste of time. Though, as I said, Matthew Peters didn't use a drone very often, and I appreciated that a lot. Another thing that I liked about Graveyard Shark is that it used practical locations oftentimes. So if you see people in a graveyard, they are in a graveyard more often than not. And I have to say more often than not because when we were first introduced to the Graveyard Shark, it was not a real graveyard. How do I know that? Tombstones. I actually enjoy walking around graveyards. What I have never seen in a graveyard were gravestones that were any thinner than 5 to 6 inches. In other words, they're pretty thick. In the introduction to the Graveyard Shark, the tombstones didn't look any thicker than maybe 2 inches at best. That's not a real graveyard. Little things take you out of a movie, and you have to pay attention to them. Costume design, production design, it all contributes to the whole. If that scene had featured thicker tombstones, the illusion of a graveyard would have went over significantly better. Just the fact that it didn't told me this is not real. And once again, we're talking about a movie about a graveyard shark. So I get it, it's not even in the ballpark of reality. But nonetheless, you want the illusion. It's important. And that immediately told me this was not real. Another thing that was interesting, and not in the best way, was the sound design. In that voices were very crisp, which is always good. Though for the most part, there was no ambient sound. So when people are outside, people are walking through the woods, there's oftentimes no accompanying sound. There's no wind noise, there's no insect sounds, there is nothing other than their voices. That is a problem. It struck me kind of odd that whoever did the sound didn't just record 5 minutes of ambient noise, wind noise essentially, and just loop it, just play that. in the background, people talking when they're outside. I'm sure that there are sounds of insects you can also buy. Anything that would help further the idea that these people are outside would have been welcome. As I said, the recording of voices was done very well. No matter where they were, it sounded really good. Though it was too clean. Record that ambient track, put it under the voices so that there's always other sounds. It would, I think, better get across the idea that these people are outside, beyond the visual. Graveyard Shark is not a bad movie in and of itself. It is silly. Once again, it's titled Graveyard Shark. But the problem is that it is too silly. And I think the best way to illustrate it is that there's a character in Graveyard Shark, well, two characters, who speak in ice cream flavors and varieties. It's the weirdest thing. And it's not funny, it's just strange. And that's the biggest issue with Graveyard Shark. Too many people are trying to be funny when it doesn't need it. And what do you think? This is Brian with ScreenFiles.com and Review. If you agree, disagree, let me know down below. And as usual, consider a like or a follow.